Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Muslims for Progressive Values. I'm your host Kendra Cordova, and today we are going to cover the introduction to the 30 Rights of Muslim Women by Daisy Khan. So I'll go into much deeper analysis of some of these sections in later videos, but today I just wanted to give you guys a little introduction here as we end Women's History Month. Want to talk about Islam specifically and the rights of women within Islam, specifically, obviously, Muslim women. If you like videos like this and you want to get more information on progressive Islam, please make sure that you like and subscribe. You can donate some money for your monthly zakat. If you want to donate to a group that focuses on progressive Islam, the link is in the description here for mpvusa.org, or go there to learn more. So this book specifically, let me show you guys, the cover is beautiful also. This book specifically is going over the 30 rights of Muslim women. She separates it through just really scholarly ways, but the language here in the book is very accessible to everybody. So I wanted to share a little bit of the introduction with you where she talks about what is the point of this book, why is she bringing this up? And then I also wanted to give you guys the quick list here of those 30 rights that she talks about here, just so we can get a general list, and then we can go into these individual sections more in future videos. Also, just a quick reminder that this Saturday I'm going to be teaching another live progressive Islamic class over Zoom, so you can sign up for that either on the Muslims for Progressive Values website, or if you've been getting any of our emails, you probably have a link to sign up for that. All right, so at the beginning of her introduction here, she says, if you're an educated Muslim woman, a woman of faith, or an activist, ally, you may share the frustration and fury that many of us feel. In the West, Muslim women's suffering is attributed to Islam itself. Meanwhile, in Muslim-majority nations, women are essential to preserving tradition, thereby keeping Islam alive. Their struggle for emancipation is linked to their fight for justice. Muslim women, about 1/8 of all people living today in the world, have been deeply impacted by the deliberate omission of the significant contributions women made to Islamic civilization. Okay, so this introduction here is acknowledging some of this frustration, this confusion, right? So I found it interesting as a revert of a few years now, where when I first came in contact with Islam, I was seeing these strong women, right? Lawyers, doctors, right? Single moms, people who were out there working and representing and, making a difference in the world. And they broke down a lot of these barriers of what I thought about Islam, because of the stereotypes that we usually see. And then learning about, the Prophet's first wife, Khadija, being the strong businesswoman and how she was the one to propose to him. All of this was just very inspiring. And I was like, wow, I never thought of all this stuff. I never learned about it. This is, so forward thinking as far as women. And then you hear all the time from people that Islam is supposed to be, progressive towards women's rights and empowering towards women and protecting women. And then there's also this other thing that we run into, which is what this book is here to talk about, and why we need to continue to talk about this stuff, right? With atrocities like FGM, high rates of what are called honor killings in certain countries, although India, at least the last time I checked, these stats a few months ago, India was the number 1 country in the world for honor killings as far as number. The second most popular country for that to happen is Pakistan, and then when you look at the Council for Foreign Relations, or the CFR, which takes a look at understanding how women are treated, their safety as far as violence against them, which of course statistically usually happens within their own home from family or friends, but also just in general in society. The bottom countries here out of the 189 countries tend to be Muslim majority countries, ones like Iraq, Iran, Sudan, places like that. And then you do hear these stereotypes, right? Where you have like the Taliban in Afghanistan right now, right? Like the way that they treat women and hide women and, you know, shame women and abuse women. And so it can be really confusing because, and just so you guys know, this video is not like an anti-Islamic video because obviously we're here to talk about Islam. I'm a Muslim. I don't believe, and progressive Muslims as a whole do not believe, that Islam is meant to be oppressive towards women. But you have to come to this table understanding that there is this frustration between the two sides, these like super powerful Islamic women and teachers and scholars, and then you've also got this other side that's going on over here. What is going on there? So there are like three main ways that this could be happening, and that's going to be talked about throughout this whole book. But the first one is sort of what the people that don't know anything about Islam think, right? As she says here, it must be Islam, right? Islam must be inherently misogynistic. That's the way it is, okay? Of course, we don't agree with that, but that is what your first, you know, argument here could be that you run into. The next one could be that maybe we're just misinterpreting Islam and a lot of people are just like doing it wrong, right? Like maybe Islam is progressive, but then we're not properly living that in the world. And then number three could be that Islam is progressive and not inherently misogynistic, but that cultural or social upbringings, expectations, conditioning creates these sort of unsafe and depressing and awful situations for women within Muslim majority countries. So there's a lot of different like ways that this could be interpreted. How is this happening? A lot of things we need to look at, but this is something that people run into, right? How can these two contradicting things be existing at the same time? And she, you know, talks about it down here later in the introduction. She says the pressing question is, how can we dismantle the mountains of mistrust, dispel the cloud of suspicion, and address the cruelty of injustice? In our pursuit of women's rights, we cannot disregard the significance of Islam. It must be an integral part of our overall strategy. Ignoring it is counterproductive. This goes back to what I've said in a lot of previous videos. When you run into injustice and people will go, oh, well, you know, Islam isn't about injustice. Islam isn't about mistreating people. That's un-Islamic. And then they wave it off and then they never talk about it again, right? So what she's saying here is that we can't just like ignore the fact that there are people using Islam to be misogynistic, right? We need to educate ourselves, understand what are the rights of women in Islam, pull it from the Quran, pull it from Hadith, pull it from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and understand what is culture, what is faith. What does God say versus like what was, you know, taught through human interactions and opinions, etc. So later she explains, in the introduction, she explains why she's making this book. So here's a paragraph I wanted to share with you guys. She says, I hope this book will convince you that change is possible, because it has been for the past 1400 years. The arguments put forward in this book should persuade you that women's rights are firmly established by the Quran, Sunnah, and Sharia. I grouped the 30 rights under the 6 objectives of the Sharia, which represent divine intent and which apply to everyone regardless of gender or religious belief. So she's going to separate it here into these like different parts of the Sharia, which if you saw my first class, if you haven't seen that, go check it out if you have time. It is almost 2 hours, so you know, when you get time. But where we broke down like what are the goals of Sharia and what guides do they use for that. She actually breaks down the women's rights sections here, pulling from Quran and Hadith into these specific sections. So she says, among the goals are promoting and protecting the principles of religion, mind, wealth, family, life, and dignity. It is noteworthy that the objectives are not fixed, but rather sophisticated. They are classified into 3. So 1, most crucial, are called essentials. 2, most significant, is necessities. And 3, least critical, is complementary. The need of the hour is to recognize, assert, and share this truth as an essential first step in unfolding divine wisdom via the voices of women. That's exactly what this book aims to do. So She goes on through in the introduction of the Quranic base for things, some examples from the Sunnah, but that's how she breaks this down. So as we go and we pick this book apart and we talk about it, we contextualize it, analyze it, you can see that this isn't just thought out in like, here are progressive rights and then here is Islam. Actually, she takes these Islamic foundations of Quran and examples from Hadith and lays them next to the intent of Sharia, and then understanding all of these, therefore understanding what the rights of women are and how they can be expressed and protected here within the modern world. So this book so far has been amazing. Let me give you her quick list here during the introduction, where she actually lists the 30 rights of women and what she wants to talk about under each of these, and then that will be the end of this little introduction video here, okay? So here's the list. The first one she says is number 1, to civic and political leadership. The Quran supports merit-based leadership, and she specifically cites here the Queen of Sheba, right? So the Queen of Sheba is this like iconic character from the Quran. She's a strong, intelligent, wise female leader who is sort of like pitted against the Prophet Solomon, and she ends up converting to Islam. Here she is, a political leader, and she's a woman, and nothing about that is looked at as being negative, right? Here she's actually raised up as this amazing, intelligent, wise leader within the Quran. Number 2, she says, is to secular education. She says the Quran stresses the importance of knowledge for all Muslims, and the Prophet supported literacy initiatives. Women and girls must have equal access to education for advancement in society, transferring knowledge to future generations. And she uses the example of Aisha here. As we know, one of the first Islamic scholars was Aisha, and she's the reason why we even have some of the information on the Prophet that we have today. So number 3 is to pursue a career. The Quran gives women the right to work and receive equal pay. The Prophet encouraged women to use their talents to earn a living. The example she gives here is Khadija, of course, as I said previously, a businesswoman who had a lot of power and influence at the time. Number 4, she says to freedom of speech and expression. The Quran directs speaking the truth and fighting injustice and grants all freedoms. The Prophet told women to communicate freely, voice their concerns, grievances, opinions, etc. She doesn't list it right here in this introduction, but one of the examples that I remember when I was at the masjid one time, and then later reading about it, was when the Prophet Muhammad was listing the things that make your wudu like invalid, right? Like one of those was like dogs, right? He talks about like dogs, and then licking you and stuff, and then he talks about like women, right? Like you're touching or kissing or whatever, like your spouse or your servant or slave at the time. Women will make your wudu invalid, right? And Aisha comes out and she goes, "Are you comparing us to dogs?" Like she questions him on this, and then he has to go into this later explanation. She's not punished for asking questions. You're supposed to ask questions. If you want to learn more about Islam, you want to learn more about Allah, you need to ask questions. And so here, freedom to speech and expression. If you disagree with something, if you have questions, if you have ideas, you should be allowed to speak them, including women. Number 5, the testimony and witness. To testimony and witness. So a lot of times here in the Quran, it's talked about how it says that like 2 women should be there to give their side of a story or to give their testimony when only 1 man is needed. This is actually because of the misogyny of the inherent misogyny of the culture at the time and cultures that continue into today. And she talks about that here. She says, a woman can be a witness in legal and in commercial cases. 2 women's testimonies are not equivalent to 1 man's. The first witness provides the testimony, and the second woman is a validator to prevent retraction through coercion. essentially 2 women are not equal to a man. Aisha's lost necklace, the adultery charge, all of that is just proven by God, who demands 4 witnesses. So oftentimes women will be in a lesser position. They will be, as it says here, coerced, abused. They're more likely to face this kind of pressure, waving off of what they have to say, etc., which she'll go into later in the book, of why this like 2 women was supposed to like sort of correct for that cultural issue. Number 6, to religious and spiritual leadership. She says here, an imam is a guide. A woman can guide her faith community in many ways. As a sheikha, spiritual guide, imama, prayer leader, ustada, teacher, qari, Quranic reciter, marriage officiant, blesser of life cycle celebrations, etc. She brings up the story of Waraka, the first woman imam, right? So the Prophet Muhammad actually told this woman, who is well versed in Islam, very knowledgeable, that she could lead the prayer of her family, right? And this is an example of women being allowed to lead prayer. She's going to go into way more detail on that when we get into the chapters themselves. Number 7, to be jurists and interpreters of Islamic texts. Women can interpret holy text and uphold justice. As muftis, jurists, magistrates, Aisha's religious knowledge surpassed many men. Again, we're bringing up Aisha. She alone transmitted 2,200 hadith, which are the basis for Islam's jurisprudence. Okay, she goes into talking about the 9,000 women jurists, early women jurists that issued decrees, taught enlightened male scholars, etc. Number 8, to gain spiritual knowledge. To gain understanding of the Creator and attain spiritual maturity, the Quran commands pursuit of spiritual knowledge, right? She talks about the influence of Rabbi Basri's concept of divine love and why Quranic arts contributed towards the golden age of Islam. So I'm going to talk about that as well. Number 9, to access religious spaces. The Quran requires women to completely partake in religious life. It is forbidden to prevent women from fulfilling their religious obligation by denying access to sacred spaces. The first mosque, designed by the Prophet as a spiritual hub for the community, had no barriers separating wives, men, women, and children. This is important to note. Again, we're going to get into way more detail later. We're just doing some quick hits here, but yes, some of the early prayers and prayer spaces were not separated by gender. Number 10, to marriage. The purpose of marriage is to unite 2 souls, to build a family based on mutual respect and compassion. So we're talking about like the marriage between the Prophet and Khadija is a great model for a marriage based on love here. And then number 11 goes on further for this, to be free of forced marriage. Forcing a girl into marriage is to improve family, social, financial connections, etc. invalidates the contract. I actually took a class with the Mifta Institute on Islamic marriage and rights within marriage, and this is absolutely true. You cannot coerce somebody into marriage, especially women and girls, and that does invalidate it. And so she's going to go further into that later. Number 12, to maturely choose marriage. A girl must be physically, mentally, and spiritually mature to assume the duties of a spouse. She must have the mental and legal capacity to understand the marriage contract and comprehend the terms to which she is agreeing. So it's going to go into that and the story of Aisha, what that can teach us about that. Number 13, to accept or refuse a polygamous marriage. I know I talked about this in my last video when I was interviewing some of the Muslims from our channel who reached out to me. They wanted to point out that like they had seen some abuses within like polygamous marriages, and they were worried about that there. There's going to be a whole section here about how important it is to note that polygamy has to be a agreed upon thing with both people in the marriage, man and woman, and that she has the right to refuse or deny this, of course. Number 14, to divorce. Women have the right to get out of a marriage for any reason or seek a divorce if her spouse abandons the family, engages in criminal behavior, deceit, or fails to provide for the children. The Quran recommends reconciliation before divorce, obviously. but we're going to talk about that in deeper context. Number 15, to family planning and reproductive justice. Couples have the right to family planning. When considering abortion, priority is given to the mother's mental and physical health. Pregnancy termination is permitted within the first 120 days. So I saw some Muslims that were standing up against some of the really harsh, draconic abortion bans that were going on in our country right now, because I live in the West, and there have been a lot of abortion ban talks and legislation. So that these like draconian, like backwards laws that are like, hey, like all abortion is bad, which puts women's lives at risk, etc. I did see a lot of Muslims actually stand up for that, because they were like, actually, according to our faith, you can have an abortion, and they went into the whys on that. So this section is going to explain that as well. So number 16, to care for orphans through adoption. Orphan care is a form of worship, right? So taking care of orphans is all throughout the Quran. It's also important to note that the Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him, was an orphan. To motherhood and womanhood, the Quran reveres motherhood, right? We hear this all the time. And she's going to go into, in this section about Hagar, Abraham's wife, going to go into the mother of Jesus, etc. And then number 18 is the right to inheritance. Inheritance is a birthright, guarantees economic independence. It's going to talk about like where there are these sort of like gender differences here within the Quran, why those are there, and how trying to understand what that means here in the modern world. Number 19 is to financial independence and equal pay. The Quran mandates equal pay for women and men, prohibits workers' exploitation. A woman has the right to maintain a standard of living by investing, managing, donating her wealth for public welfare, etc., etc. I'm going to go into that. Number 20, to own property. Women can acquire, own, manage, and dispose of their own property, and the Quran forbids interfering with their use. There should be no limits on how a woman utilizes her property for her personal well-being, etc., etc. I'm going to go into all that. Number 21, to freedom of movement. The Quran enables women to engage in social, religious, commercial, and political activities without a guardian or mahram. I'm going to go into that. Number 22, to expression of modesty. Modesty signifies a virtuous way of being, respecting the self and not revealing oneself to arouse desire. Women are free to express modesty through inner qualities and culturally appropriate external expressions without societal or legal coercion. So we're going to talk about that whole thing, which, as we know, is that's a hot button topic there. Number 23, to freedom from domestic violence. Violence against women is prohibited. I'm going to go into all of that. Number 24, to safeguard against FGM. No Islamic justification exists for FGM. We're going to go into that. Muslims with Progressive Values has lots of information and pamphlets on FGM specifically. We're going to bring those up as we go through this. Number 26, to safeguard against child and human trafficking. Trafficking women is prohibited, and it violates their autonomy and dignity and wreaks havoc on the moral fiber of society. Goes into the whole concept of Khadijah and the Prophet emancipating slaves, setting a high bar for the way that people are treated. Number 27, to health and hygiene. Women must maintain a healthy balance between physical, mental, and spiritual life. We're going to go into sort of like the medical and health section of Islam. Number 28, to fulfill being a trustee of God on earth. As trustees of God and autonomous spiritual beings, women must fulfill religious duties, promote the good and reject the bad, preserve the planet, defend the weak, and promote righteousness. So it's going to go into that. Two more. Number 29 is going to be freedom from gossip, slander, libel, defamation, and to privacy. The Quran prohibits defaming and falsely accusing women. So we're going to go over that, including modern versions of this, including cyber attacks, Islamophobia, etc. And finally, number 30 is to safeguard honor. Killing in the name of honor is a crime. Killing to settle a score or tribal dispute is a crime. It's going to go into all of that as well. Honor versus passion killings, their colonial roots, etc. So that was just a real quick running through it list of the 30 rights of Muslim women. We're going to get deeper into this book, but if you guys are looking up for a good book, whether, you know, you're a woman, you were born assigned female at birth, you're a trans woman, if you are a man who has women in your life, which because you are here alive, I'm guessing you do, whether that's your mother, your sisters, your cousins, your children, or maybe your daughters, your wives, whoever, you have women in your life, even if you yourself are not a woman, this information is very important for you. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I will have those links to more information, signing up for the classes, etc., donations down at the bottom. And inshallah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.